The commemorative plaque from the Secretary of Defense, thanking me for my service during the Iraq logistics crisis, hit the floor with a metallic clang as Sophie from HR dropped the cardboard box on my desk. I watched the corner chip off, same way my 21-year career just had. "He's got an MBA," Sophie said, not looking me in the eye while gesturing toward the kid standing in my doorway. "You'll understand. My name is Austin Patterson, though everyone calls me Ace. I'm 47 years old, and I just got fired from a job I'd held longer than some people have been alive. The kid in my doorway wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Hell, probably more than my mortgage payment too. And that's saying something since my wife Jenny and I are still paying off the house we bought when we thought job security actually meant something. "Cameron Walsh," he announced, sticking out his hand like we were meeting at a country club. "Wharton MBA, summa cum laude. The board is excited about bringing innovative approaches to regulatory management." 21 years. 21 years I'd kept Alpine Industrial Solutions compliant with every agency from OSHA to the EPA. I knew which inspector liked his coffee black with 2 sugars, never packets. I'd attended retirement parties for federal regulators I'd worked with since Bush was president. The first Bush. I'd built relationships that kept this company from getting shut down more times than I could count. "The nameplate comes right off," Cameron added, already eyeing my office like he was measuring for new furniture. "I've got some ideas about modernizing this space. Maybe some contemporary art. Update the whole vibe." The whole vibe. This kid was talking about vibes while I was thinking about how I was going to tell Jenny we might have to delay our daughter Sarah's college payments again. She's a junior at Colorado State studying engineering, and we'd already borrowed against the house once to keep her there. Without saying a word, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my leather portfolio. The one with 21 years of personal notes on every regulator, every inspection pattern, every relationship I'd built. Personal observations that weren't in any company database because I'd learned them over beers after long inspection days, or at retirement parties, or during those casual conversations that happen when you've earned someone's trust over 2 decades. I set it in the box next to the family photos Sophie was awkwardly collecting. The picture of Jenny and me at our 20th anniversary dinner, Sarah's high school graduation photo, my Navy unit from Desert Storm, most of those guys scattered across the country now, but we still keep in touch. "Multi-agency inspection starts at 4 p.m., I said quietly, checking my watch. "OSHA, EPA, and DOT. Joint operation." Sophie looked up from packing my coffee mug, the one Sarah had made me in high school pottery class with "World's Best Dad" painted in uneven letters. "We'll handle it, will you?" I asked. "Deputy Director Torres is leading today's team. His son Jason just deployed to Afghanistan for his 2nd tour. His wife Maria's been dealing with breast cancer treatments at University Hospital. He takes his coffee black with exactly 2 sugar cubes, not packets. And he expects whoever runs compliance to know the updated protocols his department released 3 weeks ago regarding multimodal transportation safety." Cameron laughed. Actually laughed. "I memorized the entire regulatory framework during my onboarding week. Plus, I've got digital access to all the latest updates. I think I can handle a routine inspection." I picked up my security badge, the one I'd worn every day for 21 years, and dropped it on top of the box. The small metal clink seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet office. "Good luck with that," I said, and walked out. The entire floor went dead silent as I passed. Janet from accounting covered her mouth with her hand, looking like she might actually cry. Wade from operations stared at his shoes. Melissa from procurement just shook her head. Nobody said a word. Not one person spoke up for the guy who'd kept their jobs safe for over 2 decades, who'd made sure this company never faced the kind of violations that could shut us down permanently. I understood why they stayed quiet. Everyone's got mortgages, car payments, kids to think about. In this economy, you don't stick your neck out for someone who's already been chopped. Still stung, though. By 3:30, I was sitting in my F-150 in the parking lot, watching government vehicles pull up to the building. 3 black SUVs and a sedan. That was Torres' full inspection team, which meant this wasn't routine at all. This was serious. Rain started hitting my windshield as my phone buzzed with panicked texts from former colleagues. What do we do about the hazmat storage protocols? Where are the DOT compliance certificates? Cameron's asking for the EPA variance documentation but can't find it. I didn't respond. Let them figure it out. Let Cameron put that Wharton MBA to work. At 3:52, Preston Caldwell's assistant came running out the front doors like the building was on fire. scanning the parking lot with desperate eyes. Caldwell, the board chair who'd been with Alpine for exactly 4 months and thought he knew better than everyone who'd been here since the Clinton administration. When she spotted my truck, she ran across the wet pavement in her heels, splashing through puddles like some kind of corporate disaster movie. I rolled my window down just enough to hear her gasping for breath. "Please, Ace." Torres walked out. He refused to even start the inspection. Cameron tried showing him his diploma, and Torres just turned around and left. Said he wouldn't waste federal resources on amateur hour. The CEO authorized me to offer anything. Anything. I checked my watch. 3:55. How's that MBA working out for everyone? Look, if you've ever been thrown under the bus by people who thought credentials mattered more than results, you know exactly how this felt. That moment when they realized they just made the biggest mistake of their careers. Pure satisfaction. The inspection team is giving us exactly 20 minutes to get you back in that building, or they're issuing a critical violation notice, she pleaded, rain dripping off her nose. Do you have any idea what that would do to our stock price? To everyone's jobs? I stared at the rain-streaked windshield, thinking about Jenny at home, probably starting dinner, not knowing our world had just turned upside down, thinking about Sarah's tuition bill that was due next month, thinking about the 401k I'd been building for 21 years that suddenly felt a lot less secure. But mostly thinking about Deputy Director Jimmy Torres walking out of that building because some kid with an MBA thought a piece of paper mattered more than the relationship I'd built with him over 2 decades. Let me back up and tell you who I am. Austin Patterson, former Navy logistics officer, 21 years keeping Alpine Industrial Solutions out of trouble. No fancy degree, just real-world experience managing supply chains under hostile fire and Desert Storm, then transitioning that knowledge to keep a manufacturing company compliant with more federal agencies than most people know exist. I started at Alpine right after my military service ended, working my way up from safety coordinator to director of regulatory affairs. When you're dealing with heavy equipment manufacturing, you're talking about regulations thicker than the Denver phone book. One major violation can shut down production lines, trigger congressional hearings, or cost millions in fines that could bankrupt a company overnight. The day before my public humiliation started with signals I should have read better. People avoiding eye contact in the hallways. My assistant Lisa's desk suddenly empty when I came in Monday morning. When I asked Wade about her, he just mumbled something about her being reassigned to special projects. Red flag number 1, but I figured it was just more corporate reorganization nonsense. Then came the executive meeting where CEO Garrett Mills kept talking about bringing fresh perspectives to regulatory management and modernizing our approach to federal compliance while dodging every direct question I asked about budget allocations and staffing changes. Red flag number 2. That evening, Wade texted me something that should have been a neon warning sign. "Sorry about tomorrow, man. Wasn't my call. You know I got your back, but this came from way above my pay grade." Red flag number 3, and I still walked into that office the next morning thinking it was just another day. Nothing prepares you for getting stabbed in the back by people you've made rich for over 2 decades. Now I sat in my truck, rain drumming on the roof like machine gun fire, while Caldwell's assistant begged me to save the company that had just thrown me away like yesterday's newspaper. Torres said he's dealt with compliance directors who learned the job from textbooks before, she continued, desperation making her voice higher. He said it never ends well. He only works with people who understand that federal inspection is about relationship and trust, not regulations and procedures. Smart man, I said. I've been telling management that for 21 years. The inspection team said if we don't have proper compliance leadership in place within 15 minutes, they'll recommend our facility for enhanced scrutiny status. That means surprise inspections every 60 days instead of annual reviews. It means production delays. It means our defense contracts get reviewed. She was painting the picture, but I already knew what enhanced scrutiny meant. I'd helped other companies dig out from under it. Some never recovered. Please, what do you want? Chief Compliance Officer title, your office back, double your salary. Whatever it takes. I let the silence stretch out while rain pounded harder against my truck. 21 years of loyalty, of working weekends during crisis situations, of flying to Washington on my own dime to maintain relationships with regulatory officials, of missing Sarah's soccer games because some inspector needed personal attention during a critical review. All of it dismissed because Preston Caldwell, who'd been with the company for 4 months, decided we needed someone with academic credentials instead of old-school relationship management. Tell me something, I said finally. Was it Mills' idea to replace me, or did Caldwell push for someone with an MBA? Caldwell led the charge. He kept saying we needed intellectual rigor in compliance, someone who understood modern regulatory frameworks and could implement systematic approaches to federal oversight. Her air quotes told me everything I needed to know. Caldwell, who'd never sat through a single inspection, who'd never had to explain to a federal official why our documentation didn't match our procedures, who'd never built the kind of personal trust that keeps inspectors focused on compliance rather than punishment. 12 minutes, she said, checking her phone. Please, Ace. What's it going to take? The question hung in the air between us while rain drummed against the roof of my truck. What did I want? I wanted more than just my job back. I wanted them to understand that experience isn't something you can download or learn from a textbook. I wanted Caldwell to personally acknowledge that he'd almost destroyed a company because he confused credentials with competence. But mostly, I wanted to make sure this never happened again. I want Executive VP of Regulatory Affairs and Operations, reporting directly to the CEO, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my system. 65% salary increase, my corner office back. And I want Cameron to work as my assistant for 12 months minimum to learn how regulatory relationships actually function in the real world. Done, she said without hesitation. Anything else? One more thing. I want Caldwell to personally apologize in front of the full board of directors for nearly destroying this company's federal standing. She hesitated for the first time, rain dripping off her chin. I don't know if... Then enjoy explaining to shareholders why we failed a joint federal inspection and got placed on enhanced scrutiny status. Enjoy explaining why our defense contracts are under review and why our stock price is about to crater. 8 minutes later, I walked back into that building, my boots echoing off the marble floor like I owned the place. Which, in a way, I guess I did now. Executives lined the hallway looking pale as ghosts. Mills stood near the elevator, tie loosened, sweat visible on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Torres sat in the main conference room with his inspection team, arms crossed, clearly annoyed but still professional. 2 OSHA inspectors, 1 EPA specialist, and a DOT compliance officer. I knew all of them personally. The moment Torres saw me, his expression softened slightly. Cutting it close, Ace. Traffic, I said with a hint of a smile. How's Jason handling his second deployment? Better than Maria and I are handling it, he replied. Kid calls when he can. Says the food's worse than his mother's cooking, which is saying something since she burns water. His eyes shifted to where Cameron stood clutching a binder with white knuckles, clearly out of his depth. Your colleague here tried telling me the hazardous waste storage requirements changed last month. I nodded. They did, Jimmy, but only for Class 3 materials, and only after completing the additional stability documentation your department approved in conjunction with EPA last quarter. The change doesn't affect our current storage protocols because we're still using the enhanced containment system we installed in 2019. Torres raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. You read the updates. I helped draft the industry comment letters on them. Remember that conference call in September where they asked for input on implementation timelines? For the next 3 hours, I guided Torres and his team through every department. I introduced him to new employees, remembered details about his family and his colleagues' careers, and made sure every regulation wasn't just met, but exceeded. When we reached the hazmat storage area, I pulled out documentation that Cameron couldn't have known existed because it lived in relationships, not filing cabinets. Here's the correspondence with your office about the variance request we filed last year, I said, handing Torres a folder. And here's the follow-up documentation showing we exceeded the recommended safety margins by 30%. Behind me, Cameron followed silently, watching as I navigated complex federal compliance through relationships built over 2 decades. I could see him starting to understand that regulatory management wasn't about memorizing rules. It was about understanding the people who wrote them and the reasons they mattered. When Torres finally signed off on the inspection, declaring us fully compliant with commendations for proactive safety measures, CEO Mills pulled me into his office. That was... Jesus, Ace. You're irreplaceable, he said, slumping into his chair like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. I tried to tell you that yesterday, I replied, not bothering to sit down. We made a serious mistake. Yes, you did. I leaned forward, hands on his desk. Now let's discuss how you're going to make sure it never happens again. What Mills didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't just come back to save one inspection. I had information. Information that could reshape our entire competitive landscape. See, during my 2 decades of building relationships with federal agencies, I'd learned more than just how to pass inspections. Inspectors talk to each other. They share concerns about companies they've reviewed. They discuss patterns they've noticed across the industry. Over the past 6 months, through casual conversations and industry contacts, I'd been hearing disturbing things about our 3 biggest competitors. Companies that had been undercutting our bids, winning contracts with suspiciously low overhead costs. That evening I made some phone calls, called in some favors, asked some careful questions. By the next morning, I had a clearer picture of what was happening in our industry. Alpine's biggest competitors, Rockwell Manufacturing, Titan Industries, and Consolidated Equipment, had been systematically cutting corners on safety protocols while paying off mid-level regulatory officials to overlook violations. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly gathering evidence, using relationships I'd built over 21 years to piece together a pattern of corruption that went deeper than anyone suspected. Phone calls to inspectors I'd worked with in other regions, conversations with federal officials who trusted me enough to share their concerns. Meanwhile, I brought Cameron to every regulatory meeting, every inspector consultation, every compliance review. Despite my initial skepticism, the kid was actually sharp when he stopped trying to impress everyone with his MBA and started paying attention to how things actually worked. "Why did you thank Inspector Rodriguez for finding that minor labeling discrepancy?" Cameron asked after one facility review. "Shouldn't we want 0 findings?" "Rodriguez prides herself on thoroughness," I explained as we walked to the parking lot. By acknowledging her professional competence, I reinforced her sense of value. She found something minor because she needs to justify her inspection time, but she overlooked 3 potential major issues because she trusts our overall compliance program. Cameron stopped walking. That's brilliant. They definitely didn't teach relationship psychology at Wharton. "No business school teaches 21 years of trust building," I said, "but you can learn it in 12 months if you pay attention and stop thinking your degree makes you smarter than everyone else." 2 weeks later, I stood before the full board of directors. Cameron sat in the corner taking notes as I'd instructed, no longer the arrogant kid who'd tried to take my office. Caldwell approached the podium looking like he was facing a firing squad. "I want to formally apologize to Executive Vice President Austin Patterson," he began, each word clearly painful. "My decision to replace him was made without understanding the critical value of institutional knowledge and relationship management in regulatory affairs. It was a significant error in judgment that nearly cost this company millions in fines and could have destroyed our federal contracting status." I nodded professionally, the picture of gracious acceptance. But inside, I knew this was just the opening act. "Thank you, Preston," I said, standing to address the board. "Now, let's discuss some information that's come to my attention regarding industry practices that could significantly impact Alpine's competitive position." I activated the presentation screen, displaying a chart showing compliance violation rates across our industry. As you can see, Alpine's violation rate is substantially lower than our competitors. But there's something interesting in these patterns. The next slide showed inspection frequency data. Notice that our 3 main competitors, Rockwell Manufacturing, Titan Industries, and Consolidated Equipment, have remarkably few surprise inspections despite having higher violation rates when they are inspected. Board members exchanged confused glances. Mills leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm presenting evidence." I clicked to the next slide, showing financial transactions and personnel records that had taken me 3 weeks to compile through my network of federal contacts. These companies have been systematically bribing mid-level regulatory officials while cutting safety corners to underbid us on federal contracts. The room erupted in overlapping questions and shocked murmurs. I raised my hand for silence. Federal investigators have been building cases against all 3 companies for the past 6 months. They kept me informed because of the trust relationships we've built over 21 years. These companies will face criminal charges within the next 2 weeks. Caldwell's face had gone ashen. If this becomes public, their stock prices will collapse. Yes, they will, I agreed calmly. Which brings me to Alpine's strategic response. I distributed folders containing my detailed analysis. We have two options. Option 1, become a key witness in the federal investigation, sharing our industry knowledge and compliance expertise. This provides us immunity, positions us as an industry leader in ethical practices, and gives us preferential access to government contracts when our competitors face debarment. Mills flipped through the documents, eyes widening. And option 2, be investigated alongside them. Without someone federal agencies trust vouching for our integrity, investigators might assume similar practices across the entire industry. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Torres spoke up via speakerphone from Washington. I'd arranged for him to join the meeting to explain the federal perspective. The Department of Justice is forming an industry task force to reshape federal contracting standards. His voice crackled through the speaker. We need companies with proven compliance records and ethical leadership to help develop new oversight frameworks. Alpine is being considered for a leadership role, assuming you have the right compliance expertise in place. I clicked to my final slide showing projected contract awards and market share gains. Our compliance reputation, combined with our competitors' legal troubles, positions us to capture approximately 40% additional market share over the next 18 months. Estimated additional revenue, $180 million annually. The board sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what I was proposing. This restructuring plan, I continued, tapping the folder, expands our compliance department, establishes an ethics committee reporting directly to me, and creates industry advisory positions that will give us unprecedented influence in federal contracting standards. Mills looked like he was doing complex math in his head. Austin, this would fundamentally change our position in the industry. Yes, it would. The same way nearly losing our federal compliance status would have fundamentally changed our position yesterday. 3 weeks later, news broke about the federal investigation. As predicted, our competitors' stock prices collapsed as violation details became public. Rockwell Manufacturing faced bankruptcy within a month. Titan Industries lost all federal contracts. Consolidated Equipment's board voted to restructure under federal supervision. Alpine Industrial Solutions, positioned as the whistleblowing company with model compliance systems, saw our stock price increase 31% over 2 weeks. Government contracts started flowing our way as competitors faced debarment. I sat in my expanded corner office, now with an adjacent conference room and a view of the mountains, reviewing applications for my growing compliance team. Cameron entered with afternoon reports, no longer trying to prove himself, just doing solid work. Rockwell's CEO resigned this morning, he announced. Their board is interviewing candidates for federal oversight compliance. Expected, I said, signing off on vendor agreements that would have gone to competitors 6 months ago. How are we positioned for their military logistics contracts? Already submitted preliminary bids. We're the frontrunner given our cooperation with federal investigators and our compliance record. That afternoon, Torres called with the news that would complete my transformation from fired employee to industry leader. The Department of Defense is forming a permanent industry advisory committee to reshape compliance standards across all federal contractors, he said. They want someone who understands both government requirements and industry realities. Someone with integrity and proven relationships across multiple agencies. I looked out my office window at the company campus below, thinking about Jenny's reaction when I told her about my new salary and bonus structure. Thinking about Sarah's college tuition being fully covered now, with money left over for her graduate school plans. I'd be honored to serve, I replied. When I hung up, I opened my desk drawer and looked at the new nameplate that had been installed yesterday. Austin Patterson, Executive Vice President, Regulatory Affairs and Operations. Cameron's 12-month apprenticeship ended last week. Yesterday, I promoted him to Deputy Director of Compliance. He'd earned it through performance, humility, and genuine learning rather than credentials and connections. Why give me this opportunity after how I came in? He'd asked when I offered the position. Because the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, I told him. It's transforming the entire system so no one can make the same mistakes again. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or replaced by someone with better connections but less competence, I hope my story hits home. The sweetest payback isn't just getting your job back. It's reshaping the entire game so thoroughly that your value becomes undeniable. Your experience is your superpower, even when others can't see its worth. Sometimes you just have to prove it.